right, everyone, welcome to the show. Andrew, thank you so much for joining us today.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
All right, man. A lot of people come to this show from different backgrounds. So some people come from the business world, like the pure corporate world. Some people come from music, punk rock, hardcore, where you and I came up. Some people come from the arts. Some people come from politics, from the world of activism. So there's a huge mix of people that come to the show, but they all come here for one reason, and it's to learn about leadership and hear people's different takes on leadership. And with that, if you think about leadership, what does that mean for you in your life, both personally and professionally?
I mean, really, leadership to me, it's leading by example, right? Like taking the knowledge you've gained over the years, applying that to your daily life, applying it to your business, and teaching by example. Like, a leader shouldn't feel superior to, his coworkers or their coworkers, the people around them. And really, I think that's super important. Like, everyone's on the same level. Everyone is constantly learning, and everyone should strive to be better.
Yeah, I agree. It's not easy though, right? Like being human beings, like that kind of like leading by example. Because sometimes, and this is something that I'm going to say to you, I probably have never said to you before, but sometimes it's hard to kind of avoid that kind of like devil on your shoulder where you just want to be a little bit of a jerk or a little bit of a dick. And you realize like, well, being a leader is like managing that as well. And so here's the thing I'm going to say about you that I've noticed in our relationship. You don't really talk trash about people ever. I have never heard you really say an ill word about anyone. Like, you'll go in a little bit, but like you don't go hard like a lot of people. I'm not saying that's the truth about you, but it's what I've noticed about you in general, both personally and professionally.
Yeah, it's interesting. I will say I'm 100% a shit talker. You know what I mean? Like I'm 100% a shit talker, and it's something I've always done, and like around my friends to make people laugh or whatever it is, right? But over the years, especially with the internet, right? I really try hard not to put any negativity out there. Like, if somebody's posting out about a band I don't like, I'm not going to go to that post and talk bad about this band, right? I'll ignore it. Like, I don't need to put my negative thoughts out there. And you see that so much on the internet. A negative post attracts so much more attention than a positive post. If I go, hey, I love this band, either somebody's like, oh, cool, it'll get two likes, or it's going to get 20 comments of people why they hate the band and why they shouldn't be popular, or whatever it is, right? So I really do try hard, just not to add to the negative noise that's so prevalent in the internet, around our scene, around our business, like, and I think has a lot to do with growing up, right? You know what I mean? As a kid, it's easy. It's so much easier to say something negative. I hate this, right? It's so easy than to say, I love this. Like that's very hard for some people. And for me too, and I think I made a conscious decision to avoid that negativity. So if you do look at, me posting on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, I'm not adding to that negativity. And that's something I really try to do. If you catch me in the right moment, usually one-on-one, I could talk shit, right? Like, and there's certain people, close friends that I will talk shit with, close friends, but I try not to do that in a public forum, right? I do understand, I'm from a band. People know I don't want people taking my opinions and not liking something because I don't like it, right? So, choose for yourself. If I don't like something, it doesn't mean you don't have to like it, right? Same thing. If I like something, you don't have to like it, and that's something I really have been working on, for a long time, because negativity can get the best of you.
100%, man. And like, it's not just some like corny, like PMA all day, like ridiculous, like t-shirt that someone might make. This is like real deal, like negativity and resentment, absolute poison of the soul from my perspective.
Of course. And you know, it's like, I'm not like a PMA person. Like that's not something I use in my day to day. Right. But, you know, in a weird way, I do try to manifest positivity. I try to manifest success, and I set my goals and I go, hey, I want to do that. And I don't think, hey, I can't do that, and this is why I can't. It goes, I want to do that. How can I get there? What steps do I need to take to accomplish this goal? Right. So I guess that in a way, that's PMA. I don't necessarily call it that, but you know, it's like, I think positively, I believe in myself, and, you know, I use that to accomplish my goals. On the same train of thought about the negativity, especially in business, it's like, it's very hard to be successful in business if you're making enemies, right? So I always do my best, you know, especially in real estate, I do my best to meet other agents, introduce myself, have a nice, positive, friendly transaction, and go into every transaction is, hey, we're working together. We have one common goal, right? Like, yes, you're representing your sellers. I'm representing the buyer, but our goal is to sell this house together and to make our clients happy and to make it smooth and as least stressful as we can, right? So I like to work with agents to do that. Other agents think you're in a battle, right? And it's like, it's me against you, and we got to fight to get to one. And you know, sometimes you have to deal with that. But you're going to go much further making friends than making enemies.
Yeah, totally. And it's such a rudimentary thing to think about. It's like, oh, like, you know, being like positive is better. Like you're going to get better benefits from being negative, or like trying to create strong relationships with people is going to do more for you and everyone in the long run than being negative. But it's funny because like trending negative and like negative thoughts, even in music, like things that are like dark and like evil, like that's like more attractive, or like horror movies or these things. Like human beings do kind of skew that way from like a fantasy perspective, like, you know, kind of people being attracted to things that are a little bit more like street culture, you know what I mean? Like that kind of stuff where it's like, yeah, you grew up in the suburbs, and it's not like a right or a wrong. It's that there's the attractiveness of things that I think are a little like darker or fierce or have that kind of level of like almost like edginess to it. And the reality of being like, you know, more positive and being in this space, it seems rudimentary, but I understand why people kind of get stuck in that churn between the two. Like I remember growing up and wanting to be like a little bit more fierce than I actually was, instead of being this like little wimpy dude that was from Calgary, Alberta. So it's understandable, but I love your take. All right, let's talk about what you do today, man. And where I'd like to start is like, let's talk about your career, your professional career. And then I want to flip back and go back to growing up in the punk scene.
Sure.
So tell us about what you do today.
So I'm a real estate agent in the Los Angeles area. I work for a great company called Compass. It's the #1 independent brokerage in the U.S. Great company. I work with one of the top agents for the company. I'm actually based out of the Toluca Lake office, which is Toluca Lake's a small suburb in the San Fernando Valley, kind of between Studio City and Burbank. And I help people buy and sell real estate.
Right. How did you get into this industry?
So it's really interesting. Growing up, my whole life, my mom was a real estate agent, very successful. She was even the president of the board of realtors in Canal Valley, where we grew up. And she had done real estate for years. She'd owned, a lot of properties, rentals, and she did that my whole life. And I grew up around it. But the interesting thing was I was never interested in it. It wasn't something I ever wanted to do. I was always around it. It was never something I was that interested in. I guess, my whole life, I kind of always, I would always strive to be my own boss. So, part of that, okay, I want to be a musician. I want to be in a band, a touring band. Like that's being your own boss, right?
Mm-hmm.
From there, I got into fashion. I worked in a very well-known high-end retail store for a number of years. Then I branched out. I opened my own store, again, wanting to be my own boss. I started my own record label, wanting to be my own boss. And then, the older I got, I kind of decided, I was like, hey, I still want to be my own boss. I still want the freedom that comes along with that. But I need something that is more long-term and that could really support me in the future. And, I instantly thought of real estate, right? So once I had that in my mind, I was like, okay, I want to get into real estate. What do I do? I reached out to one of my friends that was a real estate agent. I said, hey, I'm looking to get my license. What do I need to do? So I started taking the online classes. I applied for to take the test, pass the test. And then once you pass the test, because with real estate, you're basically your own boss. Any brokerage, you can go to any brokerage and there's a good chance most of them someone's going to take you, right? Because they don't pay you. Like you're not on salary, like you pay them. So of course they're, somebody's going to take you. So on another recommendation from a different friend.
What do you mean? What do you mean you pay them?
Well, so the way real estate works, it's commission based, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's say I get commission from a sale. My brokerage takes a split of that commission, a set number that could change. It's again like negotiated between the agent and the brokerage, but they get a split from every deal that you make. So, let's say, some people, some splits are 25%. So they potentially get 25% of every deal, so you're paying them. So of course they're, at that point, every brokerage wants a new agent because that's more revenue for them, right? Mm-hmm. The more successful you are, the more money they make.
What's the benefit though of working with a brokerage? Like, can someone not work with a brokerage and be a real estate agent?
Well, if you have your broker's license, you have to hang your license with a broker, right? Mm-hmm. So you could bypass that and get your broker's license and be independent. But you don't have a lot of the benefits, which is like, marketing, right? My company spends millions of dollars a year marketing Compass. So I benefit off that. Like if I'm meeting a potential seller, they want to know that they're working with an agent from a real company, right? And so it's like, okay, well, we're going to interview people from the top 3 brokerages. So maybe they're going to interview Coldwell Banker, the agency, and someone from Compass. So it opens up a lot of doors. It's like, saying you work for Nike, right? Like, yes, you could start your own footwear brand, right? But it's much more powerful to say, oh, I'm a designer at Nike, right? Rather than I'm a designer at Joe Shoes.
Yeah. If we put this in the framework of something I talk about around leadership, it's what I call the 3 C's: credibility, content, and connection. So credibility gets you a seat at the table. It opens up a door. It makes someone willing to talk to you. And the thing about credibility is credibility can be gone in a second or or gotten in a second. Credibility is important, but it's relatively flimsy because it's the other 2. It's your content. So like what you actually know and your ability to express it, and then your connection, how good you are at building a relationship. So for you, and I'd say for realtors, really the credibility starts from being part of a good brokerage because it's kind of what gets you in the door, but it's your ability to have the other 2 things, like your content and your connection, that allows you to like really develop relationships and be successful. Is that right?
100% agree. Yes.
Okay. So you start this path, you get into this. Did you like it right away? Not like it right away? What happened?
I did like it right away. I think there's a lot of misconceptions about being a real estate agent. And,
Oh yeah.
And this is something I tell a lot of people, like, hey, Andrew, looks like you've been very successful. I'm thinking about getting my license. Like, what should I be doing? Right. And I think a lot of people don't realize, as a real estate agent, you're running your own business, right? There's a lot of upfront fees, whether it's, E&O insurance, which is basically errors and omissions on a contract. So if you mess up on a contract, you're insured, protects you, but you got to pay for that annually. You need to pay MLS fees, which is the multiple listing service. So in order to have access to that and to put your listings where they're syndicated across the internet, you need access to that. You need to pay an annual fee. So it's an expensive business to get started in. But the other thing that I think a lot of people don't realize is the average agent does not make one sale their first year. So you
work for free for a year?
Yeah. I mean,
oh
work
my
for
God.
free. Yeah. I mean, and I think that's a common misconception. People are like, oh, I'm going to become a real estate agent. I'm going to, go to a brokerage, and they're just going to start giving me buyers and sellers. And it doesn't work that way. You're responsible for your own business, and you need to get out there and grind to get that business. And then you need to be prepared to not make a sale your first year, entire first year. And that's very common. And, there's a very well-known real estate coach named Tom Ferry. And he always says that most new agents fail out of real estate within 3 years.
Mm.
So, you need to, I tell a lot of people that are interested in getting into the business, like, if you're currently working a job, you may not want to quit. Like, you may need that income. Start, get your license, start working in real estate, start letting everybody that you're a real estate agent. And then as your business grows, then you could quit that job. But
it sounds like the advice that you'd give to someone who's trying to become a musician.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. A lot of kids like, I want to start a band, and all of a sudden I'm going to be on this big tour and a major label, and it's like, it doesn't work that way. Like, you got to save up money for your recording, right? You got to record the demo, then you got to go out there and play for free, opening up all these shows, right? And then maybe a record label is interested in signing you. You get a little money to record. You get on a bigger stage, but you got to grow that business, and you got to put money into marketing, right? And you gotta spread awareness, and you got to be great. If you really want to stand out in music and real estate, you got to be great. You got to build connections. You got to meet people, and you got to be good at what you do.
Yeah, and well, there's a difference. You got to be good at what you do. You got to be great, because there's a big difference between good and great.
Of course.
And let me ask you, like, what's your thoughts? And like, I love that we kind of started touching on the music side of it, because, like, dude, exactly, like, playing in bands and doing all this stuff, it's like you do it all for free.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you're actually paying money to do all this. So the parallels between this and becoming a real estate agent are super clear. But tell me, or tell us, like, based on your experience with music, your experience with tradition, your experience as a real estate agent, what's the difference between good and great?
The difference between good and great, I think a lot of that has to do maybe with you as a person. I think good is kind of fitting in with your peers, right? Doing the same thing everyone else is doing, maybe at a successful level, like doing the same thing a successful band or a successful store or successful real estate agent, following the blueprint. I think great comes when you break the mold, when you step outside of the blueprint, inject yourself into what you're doing, and basically show, like, I'm great because nobody else can offer what I offer. Nobody else is doing what I'm doing. Yes, they may be doing something similar, but I'm doing it my way, right? So like when we opened our store, right?
Tradition.
Tradition, yeah. Streetwear and sneakers. We opened in 2006. I had a partner that also came from Fred Siegel. We opened in Westlake Village. It was really close to where I grew up. I grew up in Thousand Oaks. Westlake Village is the next town over. Westlake Village, for people who may not be from California, it borders Calabasas, which is very popular right now. Kanye West lives there, the Kardashians, tons of sports people, right? So we were in Westlake. We were right by Oaks Christian High School. We were right by Sherwood Country Club. So there was a lot of wealth in the area, and there was a lot of youth. And we grew up in that area, right? So we wanted to bring an LA or New York style sneaker boutique to the suburbs. Nobody was doing that. If you wanted to get like limited edition Nikes and the cool streetwear brands, you were driving to LA to do that. So we wanted to bring that to the suburbs. And what we really wanted to do was differentiate ourselves from, there were Actives at that time and Pacific Sunwear and Nike Town. And, there were some people doing similar things. But what we really strove to do was put a spotlight on the culture behind. It's not just clothes. It's not just sneakers. Like what's the culture behind that? And we really did that by focusing on bi-monthly art shows. We had great art shows with great artists from Mir. Mir is a well-known LA graffiti artist. He was probably most famously known for doing early record covers for Limp Bizkit, for Downset, but very prolific graffiti artists. We had Mir in the store. We had Patrick Martinez, who's a huge modern artist now, who's, he shows all over museums, great artist from LA. And then we did in-store performances. So like we had an in-store performance in the suburbs with Raekwon from Wu-Tang Clan, right? Like incredible. We had like 300 kids packed outside, and we had DJ Muggs from Cypress Hill and Sick Jackin from Psycho Realm. We had Fashawn. So we tried to inject a little bit of the culture into the suburbs, which nobody was doing.
Yeah. Well, and so when you started Tradition is when I became more aware of you for what you did professionally rather than Strife. And we'll get to Strife in a little bit. And I became real interested in what you were doing with Tradition. Because, of course, at that time, I believe I was like making the transition from, I was still working as a therapist, but then not slowly, but making a transition to the business world. And I was becoming more aware of like people that I would view as like other guys or people in my age group that were doing something on a professional level and just kind of trying to figure out how they did it, which is eventually what ended up leading to this podcast. Like me doing it is like, I'm just super interested in how people do business, but especially how they lead. What happened with Tradition? Like how long did it last? And then what brought to your transition into real estate?
We started Tradition in 2006. And right out the gate, it was huge, right? We had coverage in Complex Magazine, The Hundreds, Streetwear Daily, like it blew up. Our first year financially was amazing. We broke all of our expectations and our sales goals. We got all the accounts, whether it was like the Nike Quick Strike accounts or Vans Vault or limited. We would carry like limited Andy Warhol Levi's and Rogue Status and all these brands at the time that were really cool, but also hard to get, right? So we were doing great. What happened, which, no fault of our own, was there was a financial collapse, right? So we hit a recession in 2008. So immediately we saw people's spending habits change. And these were wealthy people, right? We had tons of like celebrity clientele and kids from very famous families shopping with us. And instantly we saw a change. As soon as the crash happened in 2008, it was like, oh, instead of buying the $120 Nikes, they would still come in, but they're buying a $35 pair of Vans, and that was the switch. We realized that we had to make some changes. We had a location in Westlake. We had a second location in Ventura right on Main Street. And our rent, it was weird. We moved into the center in Westlake. We were kind of the first retail store. And then after that happened, all these bigger stores started moving in. So we had like Planet Blue and, all these other well-known retailers. So our rent was very excessive for what we were getting. So we downsized the store. We moved to a different location in Thousand Oaks, which was, it was half a mile away. With the recession, I could see the slowdown, right? So I was there as an owner, I would say maybe about 4 to 5 years. And I just was getting burnt out. I was working every day, and really it was like to keep the store afloat, pay the employees, and it just got really tough. And at that point, I kind of realized, I was like, hey, I want to step away from this. STRIFE just started playing more shows. We were doing some touring. We went to Europe. We went to South America. After our trip to South America, we kind of decided we wanted to do a new record. And I was just getting burnt out. So I was like, I decided to step away from the store. My partner took it over. He ended up getting some new partners and relocating into LA, into the Beverly Center, and he had that for a number of years afterwards. But that was with other people putting in some serious financial investments to keep it floating. But at that point, I kind of realized like it was strange because it was always my dream to own my own store, to open my own store and run my own store. It's always a dream of mine. But I think the reality was, I saw the other side, and it was just not something I wanted to do anymore. And I think things were changing. I think retail now is tougher than it's ever been. People's spending habits moved to the internet, right? So, and I could see it then. People would come into our store, they would see a shirt, and, they would be looking online like, oh, can I find this for cheaper with free shipping or whatever, and you're competing with these retailers with very, very low overhead, with a warehouse in the middle of nowhere that are just shipping stuff out. So I realized it was time to move on, and I guess it was a tough decision to make at the time, but sometimes you got to make tough decisions.
Yeah, well, and I want to bring all this back around after we talk about STRIFE. I want to talk about STRIFE now because like we're going backwards I like that because I want to bring it back forwards again. All right, so you've told us a lot of like the stuff that you just said about real estate. I was like, oh, damn, I didn't know that. And I could go deep with you on real estate because there's so much stuff that you and I have talked about, like this kind of people's opinions of real estate agents, and like the market and all those. And if we have time, we'll get to it. But I really wanted to hear that transition from tradition into that and hear about tradition. But let's talk about STRIFE. So for people who aren't aware, STRIFE, I mean, there's so much I could say here. Like I remember growing up in Calgary and like STRIFE was like the band for me. Like I was like, it was like I was straight edge. I was excited about hardcore, like STRIFE, like sounded like Judge, but like, like turned it up to like, a couple notches more, make it a little bit more metal, a little bit faster, a little bit more aggressive. But STRIFE went on to do like go from some like little local band to like a huge thing. So let's talk about that. So Where do you want to start with STRIFE?
Where do you want to start?
Okay. Well, first of all, let's talk about, let's just do a real quick intro. How'd you get into punk and hardcore?
Punk and hardcore. So, it's interesting. People always ask this, like, so the first punk song I ever heard, we had a close family friend that lived up in Santa Barbara, and he would always record the college radio station up there, right? Mm-hmm. And so the first song I remember hearing, I must have been like 6 or 7, and he had a tape that he recorded from the college radio station, mm-hmm. and it was a band called Bad Posture, and the song was called "Goddamn Motherfucking Son of a Bitch," and
that's it. You're done.
That was it. Yeah. Forever. Well, to us, it was so hilarious, right? Like it was such a hilarious song that we would just play it over and over. And so that was kind of like my first introduction into punk, right? Mm-hmm. Later on, in elementary school, it was weird. I was really into like rap music, like 5th and 6th grade. I think 5th grade, I auditioned for the school talent show for me and a buddy doing. I guess we were lip syncing Beastie Boys, Paul Revere, right? Like. Mm-hmm. We didn't make it to the talent show, but probably had something to do with the lyrical content, which we had no idea as 5th graders, right?
Everyone who is the same age as you and I right now is like, I did that too. Yes, yeah. Totally. That happened, like, for sure.
Yeah. And then, 6th grade, I started getting more into skateboarding, and skateboarding really led me down the path into punk and hardcore.
Okay, so like let's fast forward early STRIFE. Like tell us about like STRIFE's formation and then it becoming what it became.
We started in about 91, and basically we were like friends in the neighborhood. Like we were skater kids, and I would skate at my friend Jesse's house, and one day his next door neighbor came out. He had just moved there, and that was Sid, our drummer. He just moved from Riverside. He had played drums in a punk band, and he came out and was skating with us. And he's like, "Oh, you like punk and hardcore? Check this out." And he gave me like a Minor Threat VHS tape that I brought home. And so we started like trading music. He had a bunch of records, and I had some CDs. And so we all kind of got into hardcore. He was already into like his band. It was called SDI, and they had played Spankies over the years. They played with bands like Agnostic Front. They played a Youth of Today show at Fairmount Park, even, which is pretty crazy. Sid's only like 2 years older than me. And his band was really cool. So once he moved to town, he wanted to start a band. We met Rick in line, maybe at a Bad Religion show at the country club. Rick was in a band called Monster Club and recently straight edge, and was looking to start a straight edge band. He was from a town over called Moore Park. And we just kind of networked. And originally they had a guitar player who worked with Sid at Toys R Us. And but he was kind of like this kind of stoner burnout kind of guy, and he didn't make it to practices. And I had a guitar, and I showed up Sid. I was like, I could play guitar, and kind of. And we just started jamming, and we knew Chad from high school. We brought Chad in, and kind of how it happened. Our original bass player, who you may know, he's from up your way, was Scotty Collin from Go It Alone. And he grew up in Moore Park with Rick, and he was an awesome little straight edge dude, and great bass player at that time even. And, he played 1 or 2 shows with us and recorded on the original Stand As One demo, and then kind of disappeared.
Yeah. A nice local dude up here. All right. So shout out to Scott. So STRIFE starts. Typical thing, young band, doing your thing. When did it change? When did the first idea of like, whoa, this is going to become like a thing start happening?
Well, it took a while. I think we first started, we got a ton of pushback. Like, Orange County hardcore was super popular. It was kind of a clique. And people were like, who are these kids from the suburbs, from the 805? There's no other bands from Thousand Oaks, right? But it started changing. A few people gave us a shot. Sid knew the owner of Spankies, Izat, who ended up owning the Showcase. because his band was from Riverside. So we got on some shows there. Igby got us on some shows early on, and Caton from Hyrax, they booked shows. They gave us a chance early on. But I think what happened was we'd play these shows and we'd have 5 carloads of kids, coming from the suburbs. So all of a sudden it's like, oh, this opening band comes and there's 30 kids you've never seen before going crazy, like stage diving off everything, going nuts. Because at that time, it's like, it's all we wanted to do. So we bring carloads of kids, and I think people realize, like, hey, these guys are going to bring kids. We're going to have them play. I think, obviously, our first 7-inch was on New Age. That was a big deal for us at the time. That was kind of our favorite label, right? We loved Outspoken and Mouthpiece and Lifetime and Resurrection, all those early bands. I think the first change we saw, we recorded Am I the Only One for Life comp, and What Will Remain for the Only the Strong comp on Victory. And once those 2 songs came out, we did a short East Coast run, and you could really see a change in the reaction and the crowd response. And, from there, once we did the first LP, it was a whole different ballgame.
I remember One Truth coming out, the first Strife LP, and it looked unreal, like the packaging was incredible. Everything looked so slick. And of course, there's a big debate in punk and hardcore at the time about slick packaging and barcodes, like all of this total nonsense. But it looked like absolutely different than anything else. It looked like a real record that real musicians put out. And it had it sounded incredible. And I was, when it came out, I got a Strife shirt at the local record store. I was all about it. It was interesting though, because Strife also got hated on a ton and got a lot of pushback. So Strife was a big hardcore band, but then you became just a big band when the second LP came out. So tell us about that transition into the In This Defiance stage.
So I think, like you said, we kind of did everything we could within the realm of straight edge hardcore, right? Mm-hmm. And we kind of recognized early on, hey, if we want to do this for real, and we really want to spread this positive message, we can't just be playing to straight edge kids. We need to play with bands, with fans that have no idea what straight edge is, that don't know what hardcore is, right? So we really set off to start playing shows with bands outside of the typical hardcore or typical straight edge band. So, we did a lot of shows with Voodoo Glow Skulls, right? We did a run with Incubus. We did a full European tour with Sepultura on the Roots tour. And we were really trying to spread the hardcore message and the straight edge message to kids outside of our scene. We would play shows with Dance Hall Crashers and Aquabats, and all these different types of bands, and for kids that had never heard hardcore before, play with Pennywise. I heard on a podcast, Todd Jones, his first hardcore show was Strife opening up for Pennywise at the Ventura Fairgrounds, right? He went maybe with a brother or something to see Pennywise, and all of a sudden he's seeing this band playing heavier and faster and hardcore and, jumping around and going crazy. And obviously that attracted him, and look what he's gone on to do with, Carry On to Terror to Nails to Fireburn, I could see that impact. Even, Brian from Zobalba told me he's a guitar player. He came and saw us open for the Descendants. It was Descendants, Guttermouth, Handsome, and Strife. And he was up front, probably waiting for Descendants saw, a bunch of kids going crazy playing heavy music. And again, he made that change, and, he's like, wow, what is this? I want to get into that. That's the only way this scene can grow, right? Like it's not going to grow if you keep playing in front of the same group of people, right? You need to get out there in front of people that have no idea who you are and win them over. And that was some of the best shows I ever played were in front of thousands of people who had no idea who we were, that could boo us at any second, right? And we knew we just had to go out there, and it's like a football game or something, and kick their ass with our music,
Well, dude, that's it. So like, and this is like, not saying that you guys did this because of them, but like that's the playbook off of Sick of It All. And I remember Sick of It All getting crazy pushback. Like we can never forget the Born Again Sick of It All radio interview, which is like, I mean, this thing should have its own vinyl release, that interview. But anyways, like that idea of like, no, like this is what we're passionate about. We're going to take it to the next space. But then the community around you trying to like restrain that. And like that idea of like, kind of like you plant the seed is already in combat with the soil so the plant can sprout, right? Like competition isn't a bad thing. And kind of like almost like people trying to restrain, or you have to like kind of kick back at things. That's not a bad thing. In fact, that's incredible. But to go from good to great, you've got to be willing to do that. And that's that piece, man, that like, if you want to really go from being just good, but really take your space amongst the greats, you've got to anticipate it's going to be a tough ride, pushback. You're going to have to work hard. You're going to have to reevaluate who you are in that process. Let's just touch real quick though, like so people who don't come from the music world aren't going to know this. And I'd say like kind of a certain generation is going to understand how big STRIFE was. STRIFE was like a big band. Correct me if I'm wrong. In This Defiance at that time sold around 50,000 copies. Is that correct?
I would say more.
More. That's crazy for a hardcore record. That's like an insane amount, especially at that time. Like, I mean, like if people are judging numbers now, it's like, I mean, totally insane. But back then, for a hardcore band on an independent record label to sell, I don't know, like let's say somewhere between 50 and 100,000 records. Yeah. That's like an insane amount of records. Was there a point where you guys were living off of the band?
Well, yes, but not from our royalties, from our record sales,
Totally.
Yeah.
That goes without being said.
Yeah. Unfortunately, a young, not business-minded kid, we kind of signed a deal, and the deal wasn't necessarily bad. At the time when we signed to Victory, it was a very small 5-page contract, and I don't think at that time the contract was bad. It's pretty boilerplate contract. People take advantage of kids. People with money take advantage of people without money. And he started doing shady stuff to get out of paying bands what he owed. And, you guys have heard the stories. We're not the only band this has happened to. So unfortunately, no, we weren't making the money we should have been. But there was a time, yes, for many years, we were living off the band being a touring band.
But STRIFE was, always a hardcore band for sure. But STRIFE was like a band, an internationally recognized, legitimate force in heavy, aggressive music. And like, it was right at the emergence of the internet when people started like photos from shows were going up online. So access to photos was more frequent. Yeah. People would take photos and scan them. There's message boards. There was something different about STRIFE at that time. Like not only could you outplay people from your aggression, your passion, your energy, like incredible songs, incredible records, incredible production, actual music videos, all of that stuff. There was something about STRIFE and still is something about STRIFE that was and is so special that as we go on this crazy journey of music, you just become one of the bands. But like, I at least want to take a moment to recognize, like, without STRIFE, there isn't so many other bands. Like STRIFE had a humongous impact on, you said Todd Jones, a guy from Zabalba, but so many people can trace it right back to say, yes, I'd heard Youth of Today, I'd heard Judge, I'd heard Minor Threat, but this was my generation's version. Yes. That was STRIFE. Unbelievable, huge debt of gratitude to everyone in the band. then suddenly Strife isn't anymore. What
Yeah.
happened?
Really, the band kind of self-destructed. I think what happened was we got to a point where we needed to tour a certain amount of months out of the year in order to support ourselves, right? The older you get, the more bills you have, whether it's rent or car payments, whatever it is, right? But when you take something so personal like music and now it's a business, it loses some fun, right? Your friends are now your coworkers, and you're making decisions based on, hey, we have to do this, not, hey, we want to do this, right? I think as people were kind of getting older, we weren't old, but I think people's priorities changed, and we had the, I remember when we kind of actually broke up, and we had this huge summer of touring ahead of us. And I think everyone in the band was just kind of scared. Like, we had this, I want to say it was maybe a month and a half or 2 month tour. I think it was like Strife, Earth Crisis, Hatebreed tour planned. And then we had a full summer of Warped Tour, which I don't know, 2 months, 3 months. So it was like everyone was seeing this 5 month block of touring ahead of us. And I think certain members just maybe didn't want that. You know what I mean? Like, it's a lot. It's a lot. And, you've toured, like, it's not as glamorous as people think. It's like the same thing we said about the real estate. Like, people think you're going to go on tour and you guys it's so much fun and it's so great. But no, it's like you're sitting in a van for 8 hours a day in the heat. We didn't have cell phones, so it's like you're trying to read a book and keep yourself entertained. But really, when there's nothing to do, you keep yourself entertained by picking on people in your band, and then there's band turmoil, and you get to the show and you sound check, and the fun comes for the 45 minutes or hour you're playing. That's great. Everything else kind of sucks.
Yeah, man. It's people always say to me like, "Oh man, you've been all over the world." I'm like, really? I've been to a lot of clubs and cities and eaten a lot of mediocre food in the restaurant next door to that club. That's about what I've done.
Yeah.
I could tell you what the block that the venue's on in Paris looks like, but I couldn't have told you what Paris looked like till I went back there with my girlfriend. All right. Man, as we're getting close to the end of our time together, there's so much stuff I want to ask you, and I'd love us to have another conversation where we go in a little bit deeper on real estate. But let's hit on a couple of things here. I want to talk about these 3 movements that we're talking about professionally, and I know there's a lot of other stuff that you did in there, but I want to talk about that movement from Strife to tradition. What did you learn about yourself in Strife that allowed you to do tradition?
I guess what it sounds cliche, but like the DIY ethic of punk and hardcore taught me everything that I, still apply to my daily life, my business life. I think the power of connections, like being in Strife, back in the 90s, we had these phone dialers, and I would be making phone calls all across the US to friends and promoters and other bands. And that was our connection to the East Coast. Like we wouldn't have done those first shows on the East Coast unless I had my dialer and was hanging out at a phone booth calling Tim from Mouthpiece and being friends with him or whatever, but the power of those personal connections that go so far, right? Mm-hmm. And again, something I still apply in my daily life, in my work life. And then, believing in yourself, right? Mm-hmm. Setting a goal, and you see the end goal and figuring out the incremental goals needed to get there. Steps, like, okay, if you have this big goal in the future, these are the steps to get there, and making that happen, following through, right? Again, something I learned at Strife, something I still apply in my personal and daily life. So many things, from marketing to networking that are it's just so important.
All right. So what did you learn in tradition about yourself and about just like being a person that's going to try and do the next great thing for yourself? What did you learn in your time in tradition that set you up to go into real estate?
I mean, I think the biggest lesson from tradition was sometimes you just got to dive in head first, and nobody has the answer. Nobody has all of the knowledge, right? You need to dive in head first, and you need to learn along the way. Because if you wait till you have all the answers, your time's going to pass. And really that was it. It's like, we didn't know how to really run a real business. We just took that step and we figured it out along the way. And kind of the same with real estate. I definitely applied that into real estate. It's like, I don't have all the answers. I'm constantly learning. The real estate schooling you do and the test, that doesn't set you up for anything involved in a real estate transaction. It's necessary. I think they do that just, they want to make sure that you're able to follow through on a task, but there's nothing on that test that I apply in real life, so it's just like it's crazy. So I started in real estate, and a good friend of mine, actually a band member of mine, referred me to his dad. He's like, "Oh, you're in real estate now." Well, my dad's looking to buy something in LA. Maybe you can help my dad. And I said, "Okay, sure." Had no idea what I was doing, but I said, "Let's make it happen." Worked with his dad over, about 2 months. He was he was doing a tricky transaction, not tricky, but a little out of the ordinary, called a 1031 exchange, where basically, if you sell a rental property, you purchase a new rental property, you don't have to pay taxes on the capital gains, right? Mm-hmm. So, he explains he's doing the 1031 exchange. I'm kind of like looking on the internet, 1031 exchange, how do I do this? I'm like, oh yeah, 1031 exchange, I got this. He's looking in Playa Vista, and basically my first deal is with the top agent in Beverly Hills, like, right. Hundreds of millions of dollars a year in sales. And I'm working, and they're the listing agent, and this is my first sale. They have no idea it's my first sale. I don't know if my client knows it's my first sale, but I get him in there. I negotiate him not only thousands of dollars under ask, but I get his place fully furnished. So negotiate him a great deal. The appraiser comes, appraises it over value, so he instantly has equity, and we close the deal. So my first deal was like a $2.2 million deal, and the whole time I'm like clutching my knuckles or wide, like I don't know what I'm doing, but I have to act like I know what I'm doing. And we close the deal. The agents on the other side are super happy, like wanting to work with me again. My friend's father was super happy. It was a rental property, so we ended up closing. The day we closed, I handed him a check because I already had a new tenant the day we closed, which is very rare as well. So he was super happy, and but I just had to jump in and trust my instincts and realize, like, no, I don't have the answers, but I'm going to figure them out.
And I love that. And that says so much. Again, what I think so much is about moving from good to great is great doesn't have a pathway. Like maybe some people have gone in through the grass ahead of you, like maybe some game trails, but like there's not like a path to great. Like you got to figure that stuff out. And a lot of it is just like, I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm just going to make this thing work. Like I've never done a podcast. A lot of people have done podcasts, but nobody's done this podcast. And I didn't really figure it out until like we hit episode 50. And even then, like I'm still figuring it out. Now that I've got this great team of people, shout out to Spencer and Patrick and Tammy. So yeah, I love that. All right. So as we're wrapping up, man, a couple questions for you here.
Sure.
So the first is, if I look at your career trajectory from STRIFE to tradition to being a real estate agent, it's like, whoa, you're touring a band. That's so cool. Whoa, you own your own like streetwear brand or like, shop. That's so cool. Oh, you're a real estate agent. Yeah, that's like remarkably normal. But it's real interesting is like, you're super psyched about it and like you're really passionate about it. And if anything, it's like when I talk to you about that versus when I talk to you about your bands or when I talk to you about your record label, you're equally stoked. You actually get like more into talking about your job in real estate when we talk about it than usually if we're just talking about punk and hardcore. From an outside perspective, it could seem like you've moved from something like, wow, to like, oh, that's like relatively normal. But you seem to have maintained as much passion about each, if maybe even more passion now. How have you kept up that passion?
I think it's just finding something you love to do, right? Like you can't be passionate about something that you're not interested in. That's not fun for you, right? Real estate, I don't know, it's a person business, right? So you're making these connections and you're dealing with a very stressful transaction. It's probably the biggest purchase someone's made in their entire life. People are nervous and it's my job to control the situation and keep everyone calm. And facilitate that transaction at the same time. And I think, the way I do that is I surround myself with great people. I have a great transaction coordinator that, handles a lot of my paperwork and that's super helpful. Every part of the contract is on a time schedule and you got to meet these deadlines. So it's very important to have great people around you, great coworkers where if you do have a question, every transaction in real estate is different. So always something's going to come up. You're always going to be learning. So if you surround yourself with great real estate agents, you can always reach out to them whenever you have a question. And you'll always have a question. A great manager, my manager for my office is awesome and super helpful. A great brokerage. And, I think that really helps me be the best that I can be. And being the best that I can be makes me passionate, right? Like, I want to be able to help people. I want to, I had a close friend of mine call me, 2 months ago. I'm like, Andrew, I have this apartment in downtown LA. It's stressing me out. My tenant just moved out. It was a rental. I can't deal with this anymore. Like, can you help me? Right? Of course. Like, it's an old friend. I grew up with you 100%. Thanks for thinking of me. I'm going to make sure. I know you're already stressed out with your situation. Trust me. I'm going to take care of this. I'm going to make it as stress-free as possible. And we're going to make this a great transaction. And so basically I brought in a friend who was a contractor. He did some renovations. We listed it. We ended up selling it the first weekend in the market. Another friend of mine bought it, which is also great. But she ended up selling her property 1 week on the market for the highest price per square foot ever in that building. Mm-hmm. My friend bought it. It was his first real estate purchase. He was super excited how easy and smooth that transaction went. It's a rental for him. We ended up just renting it for the highest price per square foot in that building again as a rental. Everybody's happy. And that makes me happy to be able to not only serve my friends and make their real estate goals a reality, but also do it in a way where they walk away happy and excited and fulfilled. Like that's the way you're going to get more business, right? By doing a great job, not just a good job.
Yeah, I love that, man. All right, last two questions for you. So, I spent a lot of time in this interview hyping up STRIFE, and so for anyone who hasn't heard STRIFE, for God's sakes, go out and listen to. I got a place in my heart for One Truth, but In This Defiance is an absolute beast. Both LPs are fantastic, but the whole discography is great. What bands? Give me 3 bands that you could say without them, like there wouldn't have been me, there wouldn't have been STRIFE, and it doesn't have to be your top 3 bands, but what are 3 bands that absolutely were what STRIFE has been for people, they were that for you?
Okay. I would say Sick of It All. Not only were they all of our favorite bands, right? Great band. They gave us so many opportunities when we were a band, took us out on the road so many times, took us to Europe for the first time. So STRIFE would definitely not be the band we are without Sick of It All. But musically, huge influence on us. Chain of Strength was a huge one. I know when we started the band, our goal was basically to play the music we want, but we wanted the stage presence of Chain of Strength. Like they went off harder than any other band. They were jumping around, again, 2 of the most classic hardcore 7-inches of all times. Great musicians, an amazing drummer, which I feel our drummer was great as well. But a huge inspiration as far as stage presence. And I think, that set us apart as a band in the 90s. Things changed, when all the bands in the late 80s kind of burnt out and faded away. Everyone was doing something different, and maybe they were progressing or going more emo or more PC, and we loved all that. We loved everything from Struggle to Sam I Am, Jawbreaker, whatever. We just loved music, but we really wanted to keep the spirit of those bands from the late 80s, which were our favorites. We wanted to keep that alive, right? So if we could take the sound of a band like Judge, which would be my 3rd band, right? Mix that with the stage presence of Chain of Strength and the drive and, just the capability of a band like Sick of It All, who took their band to the next level from just touring nonstop to going from a label from Revelation to In Effect, to Relativity. So if we could mix those 3 bands, that really is what kind of the blueprint for STRIFE.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense, man. And I love what you're saying about Sick of It All. As I said on my interview with Aram, they wrote the blueprint for how to be like a hardcore business without being totally corny and cheesy, like real deal. Their influence, not just musically, but just how they've done their band has like set up a blueprint for like how hardcore has become what it's become. And again, they had to go through so much bullshit to get there. All right. So last question. As we're closing off, like, man, this has been a really cool conversation. It went to places where I wasn't expecting. If you're thinking about our audience, again, we got people from the business world, we've got artists, we got musicians, we've got people from activists, all sorts of different people, all come here for leadership. Is there anything that you want to say as we're closing off about what you think is important about just making an impact in the world?
The most important thing, obviously you got to believe in yourself, but don't take no for an answer. People are always going to tell you, no, you can't do this. This is why you can't do this. Oh, you're not ready. Don't take no for an answer, right? Like, figure out a way. If a door's locked, find a key or break it down. People want to gatekeep and people want to think that they know more than you, right? But if you're open to constantly learn, constantly better yourself, you'll get there. And I think that's really, really important. Like you mentioned, from getting the difference between good and great. It's like, don't let anyone close that door, because you can get there. You can open that door one way or another.
Right on, man. Well, listen, thank you so much. This has been like just the coolest conversation, and I appreciate you as a person, as a professional, and I wish you all the best, and I look forward to seeing you soon.
Thanks, buddy. Appreciate the interview.
And everyone, we'll see you in the outro. Spencer, drop the beat.